let's talk about the devil. The figure embodies the destructive impulses we all have, the self-absorption, and the anti-human vision of reality. The game Mouthwashing and the anime series Neon Genesis Evangelion offer chilling portrayals of the different but ultimately destructive faces of the devil. Both narratives converge on a shared thematic core of inaction, the disintegration of community, and the desperate search for meaning in an increasingly chaotic and cold world. In Mouthwashing, the devil primarily manifests through Jimmy, the pilot of the Tulpar. From the seemingly innocuous action of taking control after the crash, where all of his actions subsequently degrade into revealing a deeper malice not only for his crew but all of reality, his initial justifications, cloaked in the language of responsibility and necessity, gradually unravel to reveal a profound resentment not only for others but for himself. Jimmy isolates Curly, the captain of the Tulpar, instrumentalizing his friendship with him and exploits his insecurities and general agreeableness. He dismisses Anya, silencing her attempts to voice any concern, and eventually blocks her from his vision entirely, denying even in his own mind the sexual assault, and views Daisuke as a tool to subdue Swansea and to complete the truly dangerous task. By Chapter 7, the cracks in Jimmy's facade of humanity have become chasms, culminating in the revelation of the sexual assault of Anya. And this is where the mask fully drops, because we see that this act isn't only an act of violence, but it's a declaration of power, a twisted assertion of the self over reality. And Evangelion, while operating on a grander, more apocalyptic scale, mirrors this. Shinji Ikari, burdened by the weight of expectation and his own perceived inadequacy, embodies a different facet of the devil, as he grapples not only with the evils of the external, but the malice within his heart, that paralyze him with self-doubt and a profound fear of connection, of participation. He repeatedly attempts to escape the responsibility thrusted upon him, initially refusing to pilot EVA Unit 1, and instead retreats into himself. Like Jimmy, he ultimately isolates himself from the community that seeks to support him. In Shinji's case, he pushes away his family, Rei, Asuka, and Misato, which ultimately culminates in the cataclysmic events of the end of Evangelion, where this rejection of the world triggers the third impact. Both Jimmy and Shinji, despite their vastly different personalities and motivations, represent the potential for self-destruction inherent in the human condition. They exemplify the dangers of inaction and the seductive allure of self-pity. Their journeys, while playing out in distinctly different contexts, offer a chillingly unified portrayal of the seduction of suicide, reminding us of the depths of inhumanity we can reach and the ever-present threat of our own passions run amok. Both Jimmy and Shinji embody this ultimately human desire as they manifest this theme in distinct yet thematically resonant ways. Jimmy, fueled by resentment and a thirst for control, perverts these communal rituals into a grotesque display of self-aggrandizement. The sequence in Chapter 21, where he forces Curly to consume his own amputated leg, serves as a horrifying climax for this self-destructive spiral. This act is not simply just cannibalism, but it's a blasphemous parody of the Last Supper, a ritual meant to symbolize unity and a shared community and sacrifice. Jimmy transforms it into the Feast of the Self, where the consumption of one's flesh becomes a twisted declaration of one's own divinity. This act, rooted in a perverse interpretation of what meaning-making is the fullness of the flaw within Nietzschean thought. While Nietzsche argued for individual will to power and the creation of one's own values, Jimmy represents the fullness of that flaw within Nietzschean thought, a descent into solipsism, where he fails to grasp that meaning isn't solely generated from within. It's discovered and cultivated through engagement with the world and crucially through connection with others. And this is where Jimmy falls short, because he's trapped in a self-made prison of resentment and attempts to generate meaning in an empty and desolate world of his own creation. This is primarily manifested through the birthday scenes within Mouthwashing, with the forced consumption of Curly's flesh, which is foreshadowed in Chapter 6 during Curly's birthday celebration. A scene which is meant to be a joyful, communal event, which is warped into a moment of disintegration when Jimmy projects his disdain for the crew onto Curly. On the other hand, Shinji's journey through Evangelion offers a different but equally disturbing reflection of this failure to engage with meaning, Overwhelmed by his perceived inadequacies and the pressures to pilot Unit 1, he retreats inward, seeking a refuge in self-pity and isolation. He misinterprets connection as a source of pain, which is amplified by the ambiguous nature of all of his relationships with Rei, Asuka, Misato, and his emotionally distant father. His eventual embrace of instrumentality mirrors Jimmy's rejection of community, but through a perspective of perceived powerlessness. Rather than creating meaning through domination, Shinji seeks to obliterate meaning altogether through a nihilistic act of self-annihilation, with the merging of personal identity and the external world within the third impact. While presented as a solution to human suffering, it ultimately represents the rejection to find meaning within the world, often devoid of easy answers. It's a surrender to the homogeneous, sterile existence where individual identity and the very possibility of discovering meaning is annihilated. This represents a profound misunderstanding of the human condition, a denial of our inherent capacity to connect, to create, and to find meaning, even in the face of overwhelming struggle and despair. Both Mouthwashing and Evangelion suggest that true meaning arises not from self-deception or escapism, but instead from confronting one's vulnerabilities, embracing the human connection, and accepting responsibility that comes with being part of a larger community. And this retreat is represented within Evangelion with the Evas. His yearning for a world without pain reflects a desire to escape the complexities and responsibilities of existence, to return to a state of pre-conscious bliss. The EVA units themselves function as technological wombs, amplifying this theme of regression as the souls of the pilot's mothers are imbued with the EVAs, creating an unsettling mother-child dynamic. The entry plugs, with the amniotic fluid and the umbilical cord-like connection, further reinforce this womb-like imagery. The act of piloting becomes a perverse act of returning to the mother, a symbolic regression that offers both power and a disturbing form of intimacy for the pilots. The pill form of the capsules act as a kind of anti-birth/abortion image, preventing them from fully separating from the technological womb and ultimately their mother. We have Curly, the captain of the Tulpar, and Gendo Ikari, the leader of Nerve. Both leaders who fail their communities due to a toxic combination of personal obsession and dehumanizing reliance on bureaucracy. While their motivations and contexts differ, their leadership failures share striking similarities and ultimately contribute to the devastating consequences at the end of each of their worlds. Both men are driven by a desire to recapture an idealized past relationship, blinding them to the needs of others around them. Curly clings on to his friendship with Jimmy, the ship's pilot. Despite Jimmy's increasingly erratic and destructive behavior, he repeatedly attempts to fix their broken bond, even after witnessing Jimmy's cruelty and disregard for the crew. This inaction, particularly in the face of Jimmy's assault of Anya, amounts to complicity. Curly prioritizes a hollow friendship over the safety and well-being of his crew, ultimately leading to their tragic demise. Gendo, on the other hand, is obsessed with reuniting with his deceased wife. This obsession drives him to manipulate his son, Shinji, forcing him into a psychologically damaging role of an Evangelion pilot. Furthermore, he also creates Rei clones, demonstrating his willingness to instrumentalize others and himself in pursuit of a personal selfish goal. Like Curly, he sacrifices the well-being of his community, not only risking humanity's destruction, but leading to it, for a hollow reunion with a ghost from his past. This personal obsession is further compounded by their retreat into the sterile comforts of bureaucracy. Curly, uncomfortable with conflict and genuine leadership, hides behind the ship's protocols and regulations. He refers to the faceless authorities of the Pony Express rather than taking responsibility for his crew. This reliance on bureaucracy allows him to avoid confronting the volatile dynamics between Jimmy and the others, effectively abdicating his role as a leader and enabling Jimmy's destructive behavior. While Gendo's embrace of bureaucracy is much more calculated, he manipulates Nerve, the complex web of protocols and classifications, to shield himself from accountability and to further his own agenda. The creation of the Rei clones and the instrumentalization of Shinji is facilitated by the dehumanizing logic of Nerve and the bureaucratic machine. Gendo reduces human beings to data points and expendable resources with a grand impersonal system. In both cases, this reliance on bureaucracy fosters an environment where genuine human connection becomes impossible. Curly and Gendo prioritize the abstract notions of order and efficiency over the tangible needs of individuals they are meant to protect. This dehumanization prevents the formation of meaningful relationships and leads to the climate of fear and distrust, ultimately leading to the tragic consequences that unfold. Curly and Gendo's failures serve as a powerful reminder and image that true leadership requires more than just an adherence to protocol. It demands empathy, compassion, and a genuine commitment to the well-being of your community. By prioritizing their personal goals and retreating into the sterile comforts of bureaucracy, they ultimately fail the people entrusted in their care, highlighting the devastating consequences of prioritizing the self over the collective. You have Anya and Asuka, both women trapped in cycles of abuse and neglect, have internalized their pain, creating a festering wound that ultimately poisons not only themselves, but the community they inhabit, through no fault of their own. Their attempts to mask their vulnerability, while understandable as a coping mechanism, contributes to their isolation and destruction. Anya, defined by her desire to care for others, is the mirror image of Jimmy, highlighted by Anya's attempt to get into medical school 8 times without success. Being only allowed to act as a nurse on the Pony Express, which is similar to Jimmy with an implied criminal record. The Pony Express serves as a lifeline for both of them. Anya's dedication and her chosen profession as a nurse reflects the inherent drive to nurture and heal, a classic image of motherhood, which makes the sexual assault of Anya and the eventual impregnation of her even more tragic, as Jimmy corrupts her dream. Which all culminates in Chapter 19 with her eventual suicide, which acts as her final defiance against Jimmy. It is a tragic admission of her inability to care for others, in a world that has so violated her capacity to nurture. But it is also a rejection of Jimmy's profane communion, the rejection of cannibalizing the other. In contrast to Anya's desire to nurture, we have Asuka, which presents a different response to trauma. Her childhood experiences, marked by her mother's mental illness and suicide, leads her to construct a fierce, independent persona. Her mask is essentially a facade of arrogance and competitiveness, pushing away all those who attempt to offer support. This isolation, while initially a defense mechanism, becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, contributing to her psychological breakdown within episode 22. When facing against the angel Ariel, she is forced to confront her deepest traumas. Asuka's carefully constructed defense crumbles, leaving her unable to open herself up to others, and leaving her in a catatonic state, demonstrating how silence, how often necessary, as an initial coping mechanism in the face of trauma, can ultimately become a destructive force. Their inability or unwillingness to speak out, to share their pain with others, isolates them further, and prevents them from receiving the support they desperately need. Their tragic fates serve as a stark reminder of the importance of open communication, empathy, and a willingness to confront these difficult truths. And only by addressing the silence, by acknowledging and addressing the wounds within ourselves and within our communities, can we hope to create an environment where genuine connection is possible. We have both Kaji and Swansea, the resident cynics of both Mouthwashing and Evangelion. They represent a tragic portrayal of the limitations of compassion when constrained by disillusionment. Their cynicism, while offering a shield against the pain of a broken world, ultimately becomes a cage, isolating and preventing them from fully embracing the potential for meaningful change. Kaji's interaction with both Misato and Gendo highlight the tragic consequences of self-imposed isolation. Swansea, on the other hand, in his lament in Chapter 19, reveal a profound detachment from the world beyond. This self-centered perspective, even amidst his genuine affection for Daisuke, ultimately contributes to the demise of everyone aboard the Tulpar. On the other hand, Kaji's disillusionment with the system is much more nuanced. With his interactions with Gendo Ikari and his understanding of Nerve's true purpose, he sees through the manipulations of the commander and his selfish motivations behind instrumentality. Yet he remains a detached observer, offering cryptic warnings and oblique challenges rather than direct confrontation. This detached cynicism, while a form of self-preservation within a treacherous political landscape, ultimately prevents him from taking decisive action that could have potentially averted this whole disaster. His humor and tendency to play both sides reveal his deep disillusionment with the system, but also acts as a barrier to genuine connection and meaningful intervention, which is most easily highlighted through Kaji's relationship with Misato. He clearly cares for her, demonstrated in his moments of tenderness and their shared history. However, his fear of vulnerability and his inability to fully commit prevents him from truly forming an intimate connection with her. He keeps her at an arm's length, using his cynicism and his playboy persona as a shield against emotional intimacy. He offers cryptic advice and fleeting moments of connection, but ultimately avoids the vulnerability required for a truly meaningful connection and relation. This emotional distance, a direct consequence of his cynicism, leaves both him and Misato unfulfilled, and ultimately contributes to the pervasive sense of isolation that permeates both Evangelion and Mouthwashing. Their tragic stories culminate in both Shinji and Kaji, and Swansea and Daisuke. Kaji's detached mentorship, while potentially valuable in fostering Shinji as a character, also reinforces the young pilot's sense of isolation and reinforces the idea that the system is beyond repair, while Swansea, completely disillusioned with the system, finds himself struggling mentoring Daisuke. Both Swansea and Kaji exemplify the tragic limitations of compassion when divorced from the sense of responsibility for the other. Their cynicism becomes another self-imposed prison, isolating them and preventing them from fully engaging with the world and challenging the flaws within their reality and system that perpetuates suffering. Their failures underscore the crucial need to move beyond the confines of the self and embrace the broader sense of communal responsibility, recognizing that true compassion requires not only to care about those closest to you, but to also actively work towards a better future for all. These men represent the lost potential of those who could have made a difference, but chose to retreat into the comfort embrace of cynicism, their compassion ultimately lost in the void. Mouthwashing is a twisted love letter to Evangelion. It offers a bleak and challenging response to Evangelion, taking the final scene and plays it out completely, and answers the question, how do you take care of yourself? Okay, thank you for making it to the end of the video. I really enjoyed editing and making this. It's not the best, but I hope some of you got something out of it. And if you have any suggestions for any TV shows, books, or movies, just leave it in the comments below and I'll take a look at it. If I like it, I'll do a layman's analysis of it. Anyways, take care. I love you. Stay hard.